Welcome to the Fantasy Thinker. I'm Jared Codamanch, and today I am going to go back to finally doing another episode of Lost Not Forgotten. This will be number 5. So yeah, I know it's been a while. Been busy. But finally I got another good, great, cool thing from the past to talk about here. And I am going to be talking about ElfQuest. That is right. This was a one of the more famous independent comic book series back in the 80s. Um, these things came out way back in the early 80s, and they were considered the seminal independent fantasy comic book series. Um, and I remember these books. Uh, they were so gorgeous. They look at you just gotta look at the artwork in here. It's um it's something special for that time period that came out back then. The art was done by Wendy Pini. The stories were written by Richard and Wendy Pini um, together, and her artwork was so amazing, and it was so detailed and dynamic, and really had the just a great line work with the best tone that really emphasized fantasy, epic. Um, it had romance. It had the tap. It's called Elf Quest, so it had the quest, the fantasy um, quest that was an excellent trope used for a lot of fantasy back then, but ElfQuest did it spectacularly and a lot better than a lot of the traditionally published fantasy novels at the time. And what I love about ElfQuest was first of all its independent nature. It wasn't beholden to any of the strictures of traditional comic book publishing and any of the strictures of traditional uh, literature, fantasy literature publishing as well. It was its own thing, and it was so unique and so individual that you couldn't help but love it if you were a fan of fantasy, if you were a fan of comics. And I attribute ElfQuest as being my a huge impetus on me getting into comics and wanting to read more fantasy comics. ElfQuest was the one that really stood out in the shelves, and just it was fantastic. And when I first started collecting comics, it was fantasy comics that I was looking out for, and it was there was a series called The Adventurers, which was a D&D inspired comic, and it was all in black and white with the cool artwork and stuff. And but it was always ElfQuest that stood out on those shelves that I was like, I gotta try that next, and I'm glad I did. I finally did. And what I started with was these big collected editions in full color. These are put out by Dawning um, Publishing Company, and with the Star Blaze imprint, I guess. And they reprinted the these were reprinting the original black and white comics in color for the first time, I believe. And so, and all collected together. It was I don't know how many issues were collected in one volume here, but it looks like probably 4 or 5 or something like that, if I had to guess. But and they were just beautiful, beautiful, big, colorful, and fantastic. And it starts, it starts out with a quest. It's these elves. They're a wandering nomadic tribe of elves who come across these other kind of elves. Others is the other thing, right? who are settled elves. They settled in a desert type village, and so they come across this different culture of elves, and the quest from there moves forward. And the elves they're on this kind of quest for enlightenment almost. They're looking for pieces of their history and pieces of their past, and they're looking for explanations as to why there are other elves, and why they're and how they're related to these other elves, and how their history ended up fracturing them, because eventually they, as they go on and the quest continues on, they eventually run into other tribes of elves as well, that aren't just the desert ones they run into, or the their nomadic wolf tribe elves, as wolf riders as they're called. They ride wolves, which is really cool. Who wouldn't want to ride a wolf if you could, right? As long as they don't bite. And so these elves, these wolf riders, they're on this quest to, you know, they want to make their race as it's like a nostalgic thing almost, because in the past there were these high elves that had this connection to the stars. One of the elves is actually called Star something, Stargazer or something like that. I forget the exact name, but anyways, Skywise, that's his name. Yeah, and so these elves, they have a lot of this ancestral memory that they can't quite place. They don't have the answers, and but they know it's there, and so they're on this quest to find it. And it takes them through many, many different places, and we eventually get to this place called Blue Mountain or something like that, where there's kind of a really nasty witch elf there, who's one of the race of the old high elves, but she's kind of corrupted and stuff, and has different viewpoints on things, and that's her there, and it's really cool. Um, and none of the characters are pastiche or one sided. They're all very well rounded. They're all very individuals, and um, a lot of fantasy authors at the time really loved this world. Um, I managed to get one of the original issues here, one of the original black and white issues, signed by Richard and Wendy Pini, when I went to meet them at a signing in Quincy, Mass, and that was very cool to meet them. And you can see the black and white artwork is, very well done. The line work's amazing. The inking is incredible, um, and it's just uh, it's just fantastic. Fantastic stuff. I mean, look at that. That's great. Great stuff. And on these old magazines, you got like an extra pin up in the back, and oh yeah, there's trolls in this story too. So that's pretty cool. And they're very interesting creatures. Um, so I got this original magazine signed by them way back when, and they also put out the occasional prose stuff. This is called the Elfquest, the Blood of 10 Elfquest, the Blood of 10 Chiefs, and there's a bunch of short stories in here about that world, the world of the Wolf Riders, and then they had some pretty big name authors in here for the time, and so yeah, included in here was Lynn Abbey. She was a great fantasy author back then, and also Piers Anthony was in here. He was a big name back then. C.J. Cherry. Um, she was a big author back then, a big name. Oh, and also there's somebody in here named Janie Wirtz, who we all know very well from this channel. She contributed a tale to this book. So that's very cool. And there's also Nancy Springer and Diana Paxton and Robert Aspirin from the Thieves World fame, and Diane Carey. So lots of big names in this book that were associated with ElfQuest at the time. And so I don't know what's going on with ElfQuest today. I mean, I'm sure it's I know at one point there was talks of movies and tie-ins and stuff like that. That stuff kind of fell through and never came about, which is unfortunate. This was back in the '90s, so maybe it's fortunate it didn't, because who knows what kind of you know strictures and cheesiness could have happened back then. But today, I think it could be a really wonderful thing if this ever came to be adapted. But that aside, the original books are all still available somewhere. I'm sure you can get them uh, somewhere, and they have been recollected many times in different formats. I know they did have a deal with Marvel Comics later on, where Marvel Comics ended up reprinting all of the issues in regular comic book size in color, and so those collections are probably somewhere too. You can easily find those, but all said, if you ever get a chance, this book is for all ages, like young teen and up, I would say. There's a little bit of sexuality, not nothing too adult, but it's and there's a little, and of course there's some violence. Nothing, I would say PG. I don't know, 11 maybe. It all depends on the maturity of the child, and it has some adult themes and stuff like that resonate, and so it's definitely for a variety of ages. I guess today you could classify it as young adult, maybe. Um, yeah, but it's definitely for any age reader, really. Uh, Fantastic stuff. So do yourself a favor, look up some of the old issues and just check out. I think the artwork is going to flabbergast you, and I think the story will draw you in once you get to know what's going on with these wonderful characters. And so that's it for today for Lost Not Forgotten number 5, Elf Quest. And as I always say, be good to each other. Thank you.